This episode of Two Beers Till Takeoff is sponsored by No Days Wasted, a leader in the hangover supplement industry. Listeners can now get 15% off their next purchase by using promo code 2beers. That's 2beers, beers in capital at checkout. Live life or your next trip to the maximum with No Days Wasted.
We had walked through that area and were walking back, and a hippo that we hadn't seen walking in the one direction came out from behind us. Actually, the tracker behind turned, and my cameraman turned, and I looked, and he came out of the grass. They weigh 6,000 pounds, and the grass was thick, so he was only going to clear when he was about 20 feet from me, and I had a scope on my gun with a 458 Win Mag, which isn't enough gun, but it was all I had.
Hello and welcome to Two Beers Till Takeoff, the podcast inspired by conversations overheard at the airport bar. Join Phil as he grabs a couple of beers and chats with interesting people from around the world, sharing expert knowledge and hilarious stories that you won't find in your guidebook. So pull up a stool and get ready for an adventure as we explore worlds of travel and beyond with Two Beers Till Takeoff.
4 hours in a Taliban headquarters.
I had dog meat in Laos.
Was it Golden Retriever?
Smack a dirty old smooch on our beautiful fish right here.
He didn't die, but he fell down the side of the mountain.
Hello and welcome to Two Beers Till Takeoff. My name is Phil, and today we've got a special guest for the 50th episode. Today's guest is a Canadian writer, videographer, photographer, naturalist, and professional hunter. This absolute legend has hosted multiple TV shows, is the owner of a museum of natural history, cultural arts, and conservation, and also has been a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience. I could keep going with the accolades. This man's an absolute legend and is so accomplished. Welcome to the show, Jim Shockey.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
So before we get started, I just want to tell you a bit of a funny story. So last week we were kind of chatting, scheduling a time for this interview. And afterwards I called my dad. So my dad's a huge hunter, and growing up, him and I, we would, watch your show and go hunting. And, he's a huge fan. So I call him up. I say, "Hey Dad, I have a really awesome interview lined up for next week. You'll never guess who it is." He's like, "Is it Jim Shockey?" So he literally guessed that you were coming on. He was like, "What? Oh my God, that's so great." So anyways, welcome to the show.
Oh, you betcha. Say hi to your dad next time you see him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start us off by acknowledging the elephant in the room for some listeners. Some people hear the word hunter and assume that these people are killers, they hate animals, and for the most part, that couldn't be further from the truth. So I want to set the record straight. Can you educate people on how hunting fits within conservation and the sustainability of animals?
Yeah, I mean, that's the science part of it. That nowadays in this world, there's no wildlife populations that are not managed by human beings, and to manage wildlife properly. And let's face it, there's 8 billion of us on this planet. There's not a lot of space left for wildlife, and we're encroaching on their habitat constantly. So that means we have to manage, both the predator side, the ungulate side, and there really isn't any wildlife populations that aren't managed in this world nowadays. Whales, and name an animal, they're being managed, and people that have, because we've urbanized over the last few decades, we've lost touch with that. People have lost touch in the urban centers with how wildlife actually functions in this world. It needs space. Well, the people in the city, they need space for their, soybean fields for tofu. I mean, wildlife habitat. So they can say, people can wash their hands and say, I live in the city, I don't affect wildlife. I'm vegan, even, whatever they want to say. But those fields and fields of crops are monocultures, and everything's destroyed. I mean, the field mice, the birds, there's no place for the birds to lay eggs, no cover for them. That means no predators. It's nobody in this world can wash their hands and say, I'm not causing wildlife to be killed. And so that means we have to manage it. We have to make sure there's space, habitat for the animals, and hunters actually pay for that space. I mean, the wildlife can't speak for themselves. So the hunters, by their dollars, and it's billions and billions of dollars, actually preserve wildlife habitat, and that allows the wildlife, particularly here in North America, to continue to thrive. I mean, we've got a fantastic model here in North America for wildlife management, but it's not the case all over the world. Some places it's just strictly hunter dollars that are protecting the wildlife in those areas. And I'll just, I know it's a long answer already, but I mean, it's a complicated question, but
Yeah.
to put it into perspective, if you're in Africa and you've got 10 goats, and that truly is your wealth, and you've got a garden, and that's how you're surviving, that's what's feeding your children. If you can go and kill an antelope for protein instead of one of your goats, what are you going to do? You're going to kill the antelope.
Absolutely.
Because that's no cost to you. However, if hunters come in and make that antelope worth, say, $5,000 to the village, that means a new hospital, doctors, teachers, a school. It means
Or more
shoes
goats.
for your feet. Yeah, I mean, which one are you going to kill then? The antelope that's $5,000 with all the peer pressure in your village saying don't kill it, or one of your own goats, and then with the $5,000 you can buy 20 more goats. So we have to deal with poverty first and need of those villagers before we can start getting on our altruistic bandwagon and saying let's preserve wildlife. You have to deal with poverty and before you can start talking about preserving wildlife, and dollars do that. So it's just economics 101 around the world. In many places, North America, we preserve habitat for the wildlife because of our wildlife management model. So yeah, hunters, it's not about killing. It's not even close to that. It's a spiritual
It's conservation.
relationship. Of course it is. Yeah, that's the science side of it, and then there's the spiritual side of it as well. That hunters they're not out there to kill something.
I've personally had, I guess, an experience of somebody from, I guess, a city center commenting on a post. So I shot my moose a number of years ago and posted a picture on Facebook, and then a person from Europe in a city center posted, nasty comments about, me posting this picture. And I was like, I don't think you understand what conservation means to North America, to living in rural areas. Like, you don't have to consider driving at night and possibly hitting something. So for us, like, for example, in New Brunswick, like there's deer fencing and moose fencing all across the side of our highways, because you hit a moose going 120 kilometers or 110 kilometers an hour, you're dead. Like, it's conservation, but it's also protection of humans, right?
Yeah, and there'll be people that'll put the value of the animal above a human life, and that's kind of a mutation of what humanity is. I mean, you can care about animals, but humans ultimately, that's a family, that's a person, that's a child, that's someone's mother, father, and we have to keep that in perspective. It's not just a number, a statistic of somebody dying on the road because they hit a moose.
Yeah.
Again, we've just lost a little bit of touch with the reality of wildlife in many, because we've urbanized. They don't see it anymore. They don't understand it.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is kind of a natural segue to kind of talk a bit more about family. So you've said in the past interviews that your dad, Hal, was how you develop your love of hunting. So what is your most cherished memory of hunting with your dad?
Well, I mean, like any parent who has a child that you take on a hunt for the first time. I mean, that my first white-tailed deer was with my dad, sitting right beside me or standing right beside me. I can picture it right now. I was there. That was a coming of age for me. I was 14 years old, and we lived in a trailer park. We had no money, so the meat that we got from hunting, that was our meat we ate for the winter. We didn't go buy a cow.
Yeah.
So to provide for the family, that was an important part of my growing up, of becoming, a productive member of our family and our community, to get my first deer, provide meat for the family. And Dad was right there with me. I mean, I can picture it right now, even as we're talking.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess you went to university, then you joined the army. From there, how did you decide that you wanted to become a hunting TV show host, and how are you able to get your first TV show going?
Well, there's a lot of questions in that one statement. Yeah, I didn't join the army. I left home at 17. Grew up in Saskatchewan, and I left home at 17 for university on the coast, British Columbia, where I'm right now.
Okay, yeah.
Then did 2 years there, 2 more years out in Carleton University out in Ottawa, and then came back to the coast. I was a member of Canada's national water polo team for about 6 years. So I went to two world championships, one in Ecuador, one in Berlin, and then
Oh wow.
we boycotted the 1980 Olympics, so I didn't go. In 1984, they wanted the team to centralize before the Olympics in Los Angeles, and that's 6 months before I was getting married. I had a job. And my job was antiques. I was finding the ethnocentric folk forms in Western Canada, so Doukhobor, Mennonite, Hutterite, Ukrainian vernaculars, furniture, folk art, and bringing it out to the coast and selling it. So that was my business. But right at that same time, I started writing for hunting magazines because I knew ultimately I would be in the outdoor industry. I didn't know what could be selling camouflage T-shirts. I didn't know, but I wanted to be in the outdoor world. And the art, the antique side was something I loved, but it wasn't something I was going to do for my entire life. And so I started writing for magazines. And at that time, the Cablevision companies started. And so there was hundreds of networks that didn't exist before. I mean, there was 3 networks originally in the States, CBS, ABC, and NBC. And then, suddenly there's all these hundreds of cable networks and there was no content. So I figured, well, if I provided content, they're going to be looking for it. So I got a video camera and figured out how to edit and run the video camera. And all that was set up to establish a brand in the outdoor industry. It was for the hunting, outdoor excursions and outfitting, guiding, and from there it just took off into, it was a perfect storm, really perfect timing. I wouldn't say that I had any particular talents, but I was one of the first, and just kept riding that horse. Became an outfitter during that time, bought outfitting territories in Yukon, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and the joining the army part, actually, that was a rank that was bestowed upon me.
Okay, it was.
I did 6 years. Yeah, I didn't come up through the ranks. It was because we're on the British system, they can bestow a rank.
Right.
So honorary lieutenant colonel of the 4th Canadian Ranger Patrol Group was my position in the Armed Forces of Canada. I did that for 6 years. You're only allowed 6 years with an honorary lieutenant colonelship. So yeah, I'd like to say that I came up through the ranks and earned that, but I didn't. But it was bestowed.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I saw it on Wikipedia, and then when you said, "Oh, I actually didn't join the army," I was like, Wikipedia, you can edit. Anybody can edit it. I was like, "Oh, I got taken for one there," but it's good to get the full story.
Wikipedia is an interesting conversation that we could talk about that, how that functions, because we're right now we're trying to adjust what's on there because it's incorrect, and they won't let us, and it's me telling them it's the truth. So it's quite a process to actually get the truth onto Wikipedia, and I think they're trying to manage it, but like anything, they've swung too far the other way now. It's me. I'm telling you what was going on, but anyway, hopefully we'll have that sorted out in a few months, and nobody else will make that same mistake.
Yeah, exactly. Who better to tell them about you than you, right? So on your TV show, Jim Shockey's Uncharted, which by the way is awesome. Absolutely love that show. It feels more than a hunting show. It's like watching a documentary about the culture, history, nature, and the people of the regions that you're visiting. For example, like my fiance, who doesn't watch TV or doesn't watch hunting shows, she watched it along with me, and she actually really liked it. So we watched, for example, the Mozambique crocodile hunt, and what a story that was. Can you explain for those who haven't seen this episode what brought you there and what exactly happened?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we'll start with the Uncharted. That's a 1 hour television show we did for 5 years. Um, and it was a spin-off of a television show called The Professionals that we did for 4 years before that. And it spun off into Uncharted Yukon, which we did for 2 years. And the purpose was to show what hunting's really about and what hunters are about. It's not about killing. Hunting is about, family and culture. It's about conservation. It's the spiritual side of the relationship between wildlife and human beings. It's getting in touch with your ancestral soul when you go into the wilderness. It's about field to table living. The killing of an animal is like really truly that much of what a hunt is for a true hunter. And that's what Uncharted is to bring people along on that journey around the world to look at the conservation of the wildlife species in these remotest parts of the world where tourism isn't viable. It's not a factor. No tourists are going to go to that part of Mozambique where the crocodiles are, 200 people in that region were killed by crocodiles that year. We just can't fathom that. We just can't fathom that. We can't think if we went to the tap, every time we went to the tap to get a drink of water or to fill up our coffee pot, we could be eaten, we could be killed. I mean, and in about as horrible a way as you can imagine, caught by the arm, caught by the leg, pulled underwater, and then basically, the croc will twist until something comes off.
Yeah.
And then they swallow it, and then they come after the rest of you. Meanwhile, there's 10 other crocs doing the same thing on you. You can't
terrible.
imagine that. While we were there, we were asked by the villagers, a croc had taken a young lady just a mile down the river while we were there. And we did our best to try and get that croc, although, they're such a primitive animal that I don't know that it matters because every single croc is a potential man-eater at that point. Or human eater, or whatever is politically correct to call it nowadays. And the day we left, the next day, a croc took the wife of the groundskeeper where we were staying and his daughter.
So you said his wife and his daughter?
Both of them, yeah, the next day.
So God.
It's, we just can't think about that. You want to wash your clothes. Every time you put something in the washing machine, imagine that you're taking a chance of getting dragged underwater and killed horribly. So again, we've just urbanized and we're not in touch with that. So the purpose of Uncharted was to bring people along with us on these excursions and expeditions into these wildest places and show them what the reality is. This is the truth, and it's also why we get so many people that are not hunters that watch that show, because it's the unvarnished truth. I mean, it's the truth. We're no apologies. It's the truth, and handle it or not, you can't deny it. When we're not, this isn't contrived reality where we were, writing a script up and trying to follow a script, and if you happen to fall in the river, that would make a good TV show. No, this is reality in those places, and it's, it's tragic, and it's something that we should have compassion for and understand. At least try and understand instead of trying to stick with our ideologies. It's cognitive dissonance when we're showing the truth, but it doesn't fit with our ideology. Animals are, they smile. It's Pumbaa, the warthog, and it was something that I think we accomplished with the show Uncharted. That was our flagship show. Quite proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely great show. And I guess now, like you said, you're venturing out, or you started as a writer, went into TV shows, and now you're continuing you're putting out a novel, Call Me Hunter, that's coming out. It's available for pre-sale now, and it's out, I believe, in October.
Yeah, how do I get there? It's totally backwards trying to look at the screen.
Yeah.
It was a novel. I penned the first page 25 years ago. Zhivago is dead. I killed him. I mean, those lines in that first page, I wrote it then, but I wasn't ready to sit down and write the actual novel because I hadn't lived enough. I believe you have to be a writer. I mean, you really have to live, at least the kind of writer that I like reading. I would never have been able to do it 20 years ago. And I'm 65 now. I was 45 then. I had a world of experiences, 200 days a year on the road, and since then 306 days a year on average for 20 years on the road.
Wow.
So that's allows you to live life. That'll be my dog in the background.
Yeah.
I felt I had to live life first and then write, and especially when you're talking about a novel, and that's what I did. I waited until October 2019. Mozambique was my last international trip, and I determined that in 2016. Because we were booked up 3 years in advance. Those expeditions take a lot of logistics, front loading to make them happen. So I sat down in 2019 October and started writing, and COVID hit. Timing was serendipitous, but it was the right time, and so I wrote the novel, Call Me Hunter, and it's a fictional thriller, but based on all the travels I've done. I didn't have to make up a whole bunch, because once you've lived life, you've kind of walked the walk, and so I just told the story, and I added in the fictional sort of 20% that's the thriller part. Simon & Schuster out of New York City bought it, gave me a 2-book deal, huge advance. I mean, they loved it. Emily Bessler is the rock star of editing in New York City, and she personally edited it. She's many of the best-selling authors nowadays. Emily Bessler is the one that found them. That's her stock in trade, is finding new authors that are supposedly good, and so far she's been right. Hopefully she's right one more time.
Hopefully.
It can be pre-ordered right now. If you Google the title Call Me Hunter, you can pre-order it to make sure you get a copy. It'll be shipped in October. We're just in the final stages of the copy edit. Then it'll be typesetting, and then it'll be out on the market for everybody in the bookstores.
Awesome. Looking forward to that one, and I guess I'll put a link to the pre-order there for people interested.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great. Like I say, that way they're sure they're going to get a copy of it. It's doing well already. I think even beyond their expectations. So they have high hopes for it. I think they're printing 125,000 copies, which is unheard of for a first-time author, a Canadian author to boot. Just doesn't happen. So I'm self-serving, but it's good. It's worth reading. It's kind of a combination. If you took Da Vinci Code and mixed in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and threw in a little Hunger Games, that's what it's about. It's not a hunting novel, but the character's name is Hunter.
That's an interesting mix for sure. But like I said, looking forward to that one for sure.
Well, I think it'll do well. It'll be good for those of us that ascribe to the field to table lifestyle, outdoor living, naturalists, outdoors people. It's a good read.
Awesome. I've got a question for you. I guess I'm a personal fan of the Joe Rogan Experience, and you were a guest on there was it 2018?
Yeah, I'm not sure what year it was. It was near his beginning, episode 700 or something like that.
Okay.
Joe was just, he was popular then, but
it's really exploded.
Yeah, because he's an interesting guy. I mean, he's a smart guy, common sense. He's not left or right. He just is what he is and believes what he believes, and he always looks at alternative perspectives, which nowadays, because the world is so small and there's so many of us, we have to start understanding that there is no right or wrong. There's only a cultural perspective on something. Now that said, we all know what is actually right and wrong, and then beyond that is just our perspective from where we're from, and Joe looks at it from both sides. I tremendous respect for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a time where there's so much division, it's a binary, you're this or you're that. He seems to be taking, like you said, both sides and having a conversation instead of labeling, this person as that, or that this group does this. He has a conversation with them and is able to really decipher some of the problems and better understand that other side of the table, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately for Joe, because he is so centrist on his opinions, and centrist, he'll look at both sides and say, well, this is what I think, and maybe it swings to this side, for something and swings this way for another thing, you get haters from both sides. Well, you should be standing up for us and only for us and everything we stand for, our ideologies. But, when he doesn't do it, he says, well, wait a minute, this side has this to say, and make up your own opinion, but here's mine based on listening to both sides. He gets haters on both sides wanting to come at him. But, that's kind of what news is supposed to be. And Joe he's putting it out there. And people, they hate the idea that he's so influential, because if he doesn't back their opinion, then it's actually
Doesn't matter.
causing people to look the other way. Thank goodness for Joe Rogan. Truly, like I say, tremendous respect, because he takes a lot of heat for that. The fact that he doesn't pick a side and only on that side. No, none of us should. We should always do what, look at both sides. Tolerance right now is what we really need. Tolerance is what we need in this world. And Joe has that. And people don't like it because, well, wait a minute, that means you're siding with them on this issue, but you sided with us on this issue, so whose side are you on?
Exactly. Picking teams instead of just speaking his mind and understanding what exactly his common sense is, right?
Yeah, no, he's a bright guy. He was, it was an honor to get on his podcast.
I listened back to it this week here, and great episode. And it was funny. There's just one point here before we get to Q&A, that you had a point that we may get knocked off our pedestals by China, because you were saying that you're traveling Africa and seeing all these Chinese influence. And I guess with where we are in terms of the news and the US dollar potentially being knocked off with the BRICS nations, you couldn't have been more right. So just wanted to give you your props.
But again, that's travel. I think it was Samuel Clements, Mark Twain, and I'll butcher it up, but I'll paraphrase it. Travel is the death of ignorance and bigotry. And so when you're traveling, you see what you see, and there's no denying what I saw when I traveled through China, and around the world, especially in the African countries, and their influence there, and how they're, you can colonize two different ways, militarily or economically, and that's what I'm seeing in Africa. So that was not a difficult prediction to make, that this is going to be the future. And like you say, it was 5 years ago. I think I also mentioned that pandemic, or in that podcast, that we're going to be, at some point, nature deals with overpopulations in its own way. And I said, there's going to be someday a pandemic, and we'll have to deal with it at that time. Now, what we just went through was not that. When that happens, it'll be a far more serious event. But nature's nature, and as much as we think we're the center of the universe, we're not a cosmic event, and we'll be humbled at some point as a species.
Yeah, I think it was George Carlin who said, the Earth is going to be fine, but we won't, right? If we don't treat it correctly. So with that, Jim, let's get to Q&A.
Q&A.
So Jim, Q&A is just a segment so people can get to know you a bit better. First question, hot or cold?
Hot. You mean preference? Yeah, hot.
Hot or cold, yeah. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Bus or train?
Bus.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Obvious choice, right? If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Clairvoyance.
Yeah, that's a good one. If you could have a beer with one person from history, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Genghis Khan. I think he was someone who created the world at that time like we've never seen it. He was also the central government, postal service, medical systems. I mean, he was a brilliant leader. Although what we remember him, he was also a little bit ruthless.
Yeah,
maybe they have to be able to accomplish that.
Yeah, and I've covered this, I guess, a few episodes ago, but he killed at one point 10% of the world's population, right? And he covered ground from, I think it was from China all the way to like Italy. It's crazy.
There's never been
It's
an
great.
empire, ever been an empire like his. I mean, amazing story from where it started. Love of his life, and got abducted, and what he accomplished. He shaped the world. Shaped the world.
Yeah, absolutely. He'd be an interesting character for sure. What's something you never travel without?
My satellite telephone. I want to be able to reach my wife every single day, no matter where I am, regardless of cell service.
Yeah, that's absolutely definitely a good one. What is your favorite world landmark?
I don't honestly have a favorite world landmark, and the reason is because I think every single one of them is just as important as any other one. It's like art. There's no one more important piece of art than the next piece. If someone created it from their soul for whatever ceremonial purposes, love, they're equal. So I don't have a landmark. I mean, the Rocky Mountains, if you're going to pick something geological, but
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
in terms of landmarks built by human beings, there isn't one.
Which country has the best cuisine?
South America, Peru, in the south of Peru, Arequipa, just fabulous food. I'd put Spain um, as a second to that, probably the influence, but definitely Peru.
Awesome. That's a great answer. I actually was just in Peru in October and got engaged there. And we,
Oh,
if food wise, I guess we had some guinea pig. Did you have some guinea pig when you were there?
yeah, of course, yeah, of course, yeah. It's fabulous. I mean, they raise guinea pigs like we raise chickens.
It's funny to see them afterwards when you get back to North America and make eyes with like someone's pet. You're like, oh, I ate that.
Yeah,
It's
no,
funny. What's the most underrated country?
I would say that's a more difficult question because I have to run through all the countries I've been to and filmed in.
Sure. Maybe top first one that comes to mind.
Well, again, I come back to Peru. I mean, it's spectacular, but Ethiopia culturally is unbelievable as well. Liberia, I mean, any of the stand countries, Iran is spectacular. Um, Afghanistan, I mean, they're all wonderful in their own way.
What is your favorite game meat?
Well, it depends how you define game. I mean, the best I've ever had was paca down in Central America. It's a second largest rodent behind the capybara or ronsoko or carpinchi, depending which country you're in. They call it different names. But the paca is fabulous, and it kind of harkens back to what you said about guinea pig. Fabulous eating. Brush-tailed porcupine as well is, and that's in West Africa. That was one of the finest meals I've ever had. Of the bigger stuff, any of the Asian deer, access deer, probably specifically, amazing big game. The other ones are a little bit smaller, but again, you have to define game. African eland, fabulous. But I've lived on moose my whole life, so I kind of have a love for moose as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Moose is hard to beat. Where were you the most scared on your travels?
Honestly, I've never been scared. I think fear is a wasted emotion. In that moment, if you feel that you're wasting valuable time to react. So fear is not something that I've ever felt. I mean, I've had lots of close calls, but never fear. And usually it was with people, in places where the value of human life is not high. You have to be, have your wits about you, but again, just don't be a victim. If they come at you like predator and looking at you like prey, you just have to turn the tables and be a predator looking at them as prey. And they quickly pick up on that. So it's
Body language and
yeah, of course. I mean, that human nature is human nature. If they can bully you and dominate you, then the next thing they're going to take whatever you have, including your life. So you just don't let them. Like one of us is going to get hurt really badly, and one of us is going to get killed, and we don't know who it is. So if you're willing to gamble on that, throw the dice, go ahead. But I'm all in, and so I don't feel fear. I never felt afraid in any country, and I've been to some pretty crazy countries around the world.
yeah, absolutely. If you had one last hunt Where are you going and what are you hunting?
Anything that species wouldn't matter to me, but it would be with my family. Father-in-law, our daughter, our son. And again, because a hunt means so much more than just killing something. The species doesn't matter, place doesn't matter. It's the camaraderie, family, adventure, humor. That's what hunting is all about. So it would be with a family member, and preference all my family members, everyone, my antecedents, all of us. Let's get together, and maybe that's what happens. If there is a heaven and we go there, then maybe we are together again. I don't know. But yeah, family, definitely anything with family.
Yeah, great answer. What is your favorite cocktail?
We have a vineyard. We make our own wine and cider.
Nice.
So I like both of those. Beer, I love IPAs, hazy IPAs, but coffee. I've got to have a coffee every morning. I don't have to, but I do. I'm not a big fan of water, so something with flavor. It doesn't really matter after that.
Where did you find your cheapest pint?
The cheapest, Africa, it's pretty cheap. But you're talking to somebody who's been drinking beer for long before you were born. So beer was pretty cheap back in the day, in places like Hungary. It was fabulous beer, but it was 12 cents a bottle. So probably, but I'm going back in time right now today. I don't know if there is such a thing as a cheap beer anywhere in the world.
So the popular answer usually is Beer Street in Vietnam. I was hoping that you hadn't gone. That's why I asked.
Yeah, I have not gone to Beer Street in Vietnam.
Yeah,
the places I chose to travel to were places where there's a wildlife conservation management plan in place.
Yeah.
And places where there's not, where they just deny that there's hunting, but animals are being poached left and right. I didn't spend a lot of time there. Didn't go there. Didn't choose to. Would rather go to places that are more progressive in their how they manage their wildlife.
Yeah, absolutely. Where in the world is your favorite bar and why?
Right here locally on Vancouver Island, the Lion Rampant used to be called the Brig. We've lived here 35 years, and if my wife and I want pub food, we'll go down there. It's only a block from where I'm sitting right now in our Hand-to-Man Museum on Vancouver Island.
Okay, nice.
Story time.
My wife asked me if there's a spa within 3 miles. My wife is pretty happy. So, and she's not a hunter, never will be, never was. But she loves wild game. Knows that that was the best way to raise our children, was feeding them that. But she asked me if there was one place I'd been to, where would that be, that I wanted her to see. And I told her Ethiopia, just again, culturally, it's an absolutely amazing place, wildlife-wise, conservation-wise. And she said, okay, well, let's book there, let's go. So within an hour, I had a trip book, and we went to Ethiopia, to the Omo Valley specifically. That National Geographic 25 years ago said that's the last frontier in Africa, and it truly was when we went. I think now, again, the Chinese have gone in and dammed up the Omo River, and there's a city of 20,000 Asian workers there in that spot now. But in the day, the Hammer and the Kara people were just like walking into Africa 100 years ago. Now they carried AK-47s, but that was really the only thing that told you weren't in Africa 100 years ago. It was. Yeah, she loved it. It was pretty rough. It was dry season, which is when you want to travel there.
Yeah.
But they had 4 inches of rain literally the day before we arrived, which when there's rain, it causes all the pupated insects to move to the next phase of their life, which is adulthood, which means that there was literally thousands of different types of bugs flying around in our little thatched room that we had for our bedroom. And my wife, I walked in and she was sitting in the bed. She had a book, and she just looked at me. There had to be 400 bugs, all different colors and creepy crawlies all over the bed. she just gave me the, kind of the stink eye, and then went back to reading her book. It was it wasn't supposed to be like that, but it was. But in the end, she still considers that one of the greatest adventures of her life.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine with 400 creepy crawlies all around you. My fiance probably wouldn't be too impressed either.
No, they were so cute too. I mean, that was the only thing that saved them. Their little antenna were looking up at Louisa as she was reading her book. It was pretty cute.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you maybe leave us with your Tanzania hippo story?
Well, which one? I've had very many close calls with hippos, far more than any other big game animal.
Or just to speak, I guess,
charged.
generally of hippo attacks or charging.
Yeah, I mean, probably the one people recognize most is the one in the intro to the Uncharted series, where we were looking for a rogue hippo that had been destroying the crops in a local village. And they asked us to come in and see if we could stop this one particular hippo. And they actually described him, he had scars on his side. And so we were looking for that hippo, and it was in the riverine habitat near the Salou Reserve, actually. And the river was, at that time of year, almost dried out. There was pools that were filled with hippos, but a large number of hippos were up in the actual underbrush that was along the sides of the river. And I mean, we had walked through that area and were walking back, and a hippo that we hadn't seen walking in the one direction came out from behind us. Actually, the tracker behind turned, and my cameraman turned, and I looked, and he came out of the grass going, well, they take a long time to get to accelerate. So it's not that dangerous if you see them start to accelerate, but when they're coming at you at 30 miles an hour already, and they'll weigh 6,000 pounds, and the grass was thick, so he was only going to clear when he was about 20 feet from me, and I had a scope on my gun with a 458 Win Mag, which isn't enough gun, but it was all I had, and he cleared the grass at about 20 feet going 30 miles an hour. So it's that quick where you have to make the shot. Fortunately, I mean, the purpose is to stop the charge, and 6,000 pounds coming at you at that speed is a lot of momentum. But I made the shot I had to make, and otherwise we wouldn't be talking right now. If I'd have missed, probably my camera would be dead too. So it was a close call. But again, it's not about fear. You rely on your own abilities and skill, and if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. But you'll know quick enough if you measure up. And fortunately, I did what I had to do.
Yeah, it was like I said, we were watching we were watching it on Uncharted, and heart palpitations. I was like, oh my God, like, good thing that you had the reaction and the speed to react to it, because like you said, could have been lights out.
Yeah, it would have been 100%. They kill more people than lions and leopards and elephants, Cape buffalo combined. Crocs probably kill more, but you never find the remains, so you're not sure what happened. But hippos, you find what's left over, and it's they're a problem for many of the villagers over there, and it would have been a problem for us for sure. Like I say, I wouldn't be here, but you don't get the heart palpitations until after. I was actually angry more than anything that why did it do that? And it didn't need to. So you don't feel your heart doesn't race. It's just you have to do what you got to do, and you don't let fear send a shot of adrenaline through you that makes you freeze up or react in fear, which is never the right reaction.
Right. So for you with the gun, I'm sure that you're able to react. And that feels good that you're able to do something about a possible impending danger that's coming towards you. Maybe a different situation for your cameraman, who
they're not armed. So
no,
but again, we have our skill sets, and the cameraman's skill set isn't to. I mean, there's no way I would want the cameraman to be the one protecting him and I and the other way around. I mean, he's good at what he does. He got it on camera. That's his job. My job is to protect us, and we believe in each other's abilities. You just don't fail at what your job is. So yeah, I wouldn't never be a cameraman just because I don't have the skills. Not anymore, anyway. I wouldn't even know how to turn on the modern cameras. When I started, it was record and you're going and stop recording. But nowadays, you have to have a degree just to figure out how to turn on a red camera. They're $60,000 cameras.
Yeah.
So he has that's his skill set. My skill set is to make sure that him and I get home safe and sound.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be a pretty intense job being one of your cameramen, because you're possibly being charged at by some animals. Like for example, we watched your Pakistan one where you're climbing up the Himalayan mountain chain at sometimes it's cliffs that are like almost 90-degree angles, like crazy. And I'm just there thinking like the cameraman, he must be he's got some gear and is trying to get the shot. Like it must be a difficult thing to be a cameraman for you, but also very exciting. How do they kind of prepare physically, mentally, logistically to have those, to do these crazy adventures?
I mean, I call the cameramen the special forces of our industry because they truly are. I mean, they're special. They're like we just talked about, they can't protect themselves in a given situation. They're carrying far more gear than what I carry, and it's awkward. Cables running all over and earphones and heavy and they've got to constantly be working in the middle of the night. They're downloading all the footage, and so they're clearing the cards so they're ready for the next day. And back in the day, it was actual cartridges, film, or digital film, whatever that was, tape. But how they prepare. I mean, Matt Zanil is the best of the best, and when he's not with me or wasn't with me in the days we traveled together, over 8 years we traveled around the world together. He was rock climbing and doing crazy, air puppy snowboarding down mountains, crazy mountains, climbing and coming down. I mean, he's broken his neck doing that. Like he's a special, like I say, special forces, special human being. Our son Branlin, when we were in Nepal in the Himalayan mountains, he was, Bran was up way above us, and we were at 16,000 feet, and he was above us carrying all that gear and getting the shots. They're just, I don't know if there's any special preparation they do. Like you don't see them working out and taking steroids or anything. They're just born to do it, and they're really, really good at it. I think it's got to be genetic. They'll someday define the gene that will tell you you're a cameraman or not. But they're special people. They really are. They have to be adrenaline junkies and ready for adventure. And it sounds like you've got some amazing cameramen who are able to follow along on the adventure, because there's definitely a lot of adventure on your shows. So Jim, I guess for you, what's next? Anything new next in the cards other than the book? Well, the novel is going to take up a lot of my time. I mean, there'll be book tours, and like I say, they have high expectations of this novel. Hopefully, it'll get turned into a movie. But I signed a 2-book deal with Simon & Schuster out of New York City, so I've got to sit down and write the sequel to Call Me Hunter. That's going to take up a fair bit of what time I have left, and once that's out, if I've still got any bandwidth, I'd probably get into politics. And I think if you can vote, and that's wonderful, but if you really want to make changes and you see something going wrong with our governance in our country, then you want to stand up and be counted. And so I would probably throw my name in the hat and run for federal politics to be a member of parliament, federal member of parliament, or I'll try. And if what my views are and my wisdom isn't what people want, then don't vote me in. Don't choose me. Don't nominate me. But that would be if I've got the bandwidth. I mean, I'm 65, so there comes a point where sitting in a rocking chair and watching sunsets and sipping on my homemade cider, sounds pretty good with my dog by my side, and of course my soulmate Louise, which that's we can't see into the future. We don't know what we're granted or will be granted. It's so we live day to day. But yeah, if there's a bandwidth, there's time, that's probably where I'd head.
Right on. Looking forward to that. Jim, so I guess where can the people find you online?
JimShockey.com, I think is the best way. They can Google me. You'll get all the references you want. I mean, makes me want to throw up seeing my name all over the place, but it is. I'm right. We're on Facebook and Instagram. I think we've got 1.2 million followers on those social media platforms. Twitter. So that's probably the easiest for people that want to keep track of what I'm up to day to day. Come to our Hand and Man Museum here on Vancouver Island, Maple Bay, just north of Victoria, about an hour. I'm usually here once a day. That's where I'm doing this right now. We had over 26,000 visitors last year, and it's donation only. There's no cover charge, so anybody's welcome to come here. And there's a chance that I'll be here if you want to see me in person. But otherwise, online is the best way. And if you want to read what my life's been about, like I say, Call Me Hunter, the novel that I wrote, they can pre-order it right now online. Just Google the title, Call Me Hunter, buy it on Amazon or Chapters, or pre-order it right now. And it's going to be out in audiobooks as well. So that can, and in Kindle form. So it's out there. It's that'll give you some of the background. And like I said, come to our Hand and Man Museum here in Vancouver Island. That's the other way, or social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Jim, you're incredibly humble. You've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah. Anyways, thanks a lot for coming on, and I really appreciate you.
That's my pleasure. It's been an honor. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Two Beers Till Takeoff. Do you want free additional content or just to stay connected with the show? Then give us a follow on our social media platform. That means TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of them. Are you in need of podcast production services, video editing, or anything in between? Then look no further than Strut Sound Productions, the official producer of the Two Beers Till Takeoff podcast. Music produced by Alex Gagné. Check out his work in our show notes. Voiceover done by Viking Leo K. See you next week on Two Beers Till Takeoff.